you view life. You know what, Ben? I can't believe it. I can't believe I'm in the last chapter of my life. I can't believe it. I'm like eternally 21. And he said, okay. Do you remember 30 years ago? This is what he said to me. I said, yes. He said, does 30 years ago seem like a long time? I said, yeah. He said, don't you think you have 30 more years in your life to live? I said, yeah, I do. I think I have at least 30 years. He said, what's wrong with that?
John Travolta's rise to fame started in one of the most unlikely places, a small, cramped house in Englewood, New Jersey. Born on February 18, 1954, John was the youngest of 6 children in a household that struggled just to make ends meet. His father, Salvatore Sam Travolta, was once a semi-pro football player, but when that dream ended, he took a job at a local tyre shop. Every night, he came home with hands stained in grease and the smell of rubber still clinging to him. He worked hard, but the money never went far. Rent, food, bills, it was always tight. Meanwhile, John's mother, Helen Cecilia Burke, had her own dreams. She once hoped to be a performer herself, working in radio and theatre. But when those opportunities faded, she turned her passion into teaching. She worked as a drama and English teacher, pouring her heart into her children and her students, hoping that maybe they could have the career she never got. But here's where the story takes a turn. That small home wasn't just crowded, it was noisy, stressful, and filled with tension. John shared a room with 2 brothers. Privacy didn't exist. The fridge was often half empty and meals were made to stretch, usually pasta, bread, or whatever was cheapest. For young John, the way to stand out in that kind of chaos was to perform. He would sing, dance, and memorize lines just to grab a moment of attention, even if just for a few seconds. As early as age 10, John knew he wanted to be on stage or in front of a camera. He watched how his siblings rehearsed their plays, absorbing every movement. His mother noticed too and began feeding that fire, giving him scripts and encouraging his talent. It wasn't just a hobby, it was his escape. By the time he was 16, John had made up his mind. He wasn't going to wait for life to hand him a break. He dropped out of high school in November 1970, a move that shocked his teachers and even his family. He wasn't running from something, he was running toward it. Armed with only $150, a worn suitcase and a copy of the Actors Studio Handbook, John boarded a bus for New York City. What came next was brutal. New York didn't greet him with open arms. Casting directors ignored him. Rejections piled up. He lived off cheap hot dogs, water from public fountains, and any free food he could find. He slept on couches, backstage corners, or wherever he could find a spot. Some nights he didn't sleep at all. Still, he refused to call home. He didn't want to be seen as a failure. In later interviews, John said, "There were days I thought I wouldn't make it. But the dream, it was the only meal that kept me alive." Those words weren't poetic, they were literal. The hunger was real, but his hunger to succeed was stronger. Then came a spark of luck, disguised as eavesdropping. One day in August 1971, while folding clothes in a laundromat, John overheard 2 actors talking about an open audition for a touring production of Grease. He'd never even seen the show, but that didn't stop him. He showed up, pretended he knew it, and gave it everything he had. It wasn't perfect, but it was raw and real. He landed the role of Doody. That moment changed everything. For 11 straight months, John travelled to 47 cities, performing over 300 shows. He made $185 a week, more money than he had ever seen before. More importantly, he was no longer invisible. He was doing what he loved, and for the first time, the world clapped back. But this was just the beginning. He still hadn't cracked Hollywood, and the road ahead was long. But the foundation was set. The boy from Englewood had proven he could survive, and now he was ready to fight for more. With his first taste of real acting success behind him, John Travolta packed up once again, this time heading west. In 1974, he drove to California in a beat-up Oldsmobile with just $847 in his pocket. His car broke down along the way, and for a while he lived out of parking lots, bathing in gym showers for $3 a day and showing up to auditions looking as polished as he could manage. At first, the roles were small, really small. His first job was on the show Emergency, where he played an unconscious car crash victim. The scene lasted only 47 seconds, and he earned just $75. Another appearance gave him a single line on The Rookies. These weren't glamorous gigs, but they were stepping stones. Then came the moment that would flip his career. A casting director needed someone quickly for a new sitcom pilot. Travolta showed up 23 minutes late, wearing the wrong outfit. He figured he had already blown it. But when the cameras rolled, something clicked. He slipped into the character of Vinnie Barbarino, a Brooklyn teenager with quick wit, swagger, and charm. The producers were hooked. On September 9th, 1975, Welcome Back, Kotter premiered on ABC, and Travolta became a household name almost overnight. Within 6 weeks, he was getting over 10,000 fan letters per week. A BC hired 2 people just to go through the mail. His catchphrase, "Up your nose with a rubber hose," became a cultural slogan, printed on t-shirts, lunchboxes, and stickers that generated millions in merchandise sales. But success came with a trap. Directors and producers now saw him only as Vinnie Barbarino. They didn't believe he could do more. When he auditioned for Saturday Night Fever, one director told him flat out, "I don't want Barbarino in my movie." Travolta knew he had to break out of the role that had made him famous or risk being stuck there forever. So he studied. He walked the streets of Brooklyn, watching how local teens moved, spoke, and carried themselves. He observed their rhythms, their posture, their attitude. He wasn't just preparing for a role, he was rebuilding his image. Saturday Night Fever wasn't just a movie opportunity, it was his shot at showing the world that he had depth. And when filming began in 1977, Travolta pushed himself to the limit. He rehearsed for 12 hours a day, collapsing between takes from exhaustion. He later said his legs would shake so badly he could barely walk, but he kept going. His iconic white suit was soaked through with sweat after every scene. The pain paid off. The film made over $200 million and earned Travolta an Oscar nomination at just 23 years old. His performance wasn't just acting, it was a mix of discipline, hunger, and years of bottled-up energy finally released. Then came 1978, and Grease. Travolta stepped into the role of Danny Zuko, and the world went crazy. The film grossed more than $300 million, making it one of the most successful movie musicals of all time. Teenagers everywhere hung posters of him on their walls, sang the songs from the soundtrack, and memorized every line. Travolta had become a global superstar, but behind the smile and the fame, he was already burning out. The constant interviews, travel, press appearances, and expectations were overwhelming. "Fame had given me everything," he later said, but it was starting to take everything too. And just when it looked like his career was peaking, the cracks started to show. He wanted deeper roles, something more than smirks and leather jackets, but the industry wasn't ready to let him grow. That led to his first major setback. In 1983, Staying Alive, the sequel to Saturday Night Fever, was meant to show his evolution. But critics destroyed it, calling the film shallow and calling Travolta's performance style over substance. The box office was decent, but the damage to his reputation was serious. Then came Moment by Moment, a romantic drama with Lily Tomlin. The reviews were even worse. Travolta later admitted he spent nights staring at the headlines in hotel rooms, feeling like the world had turned on him. But here's the thing, he didn't quit. The same grit that got him through New York hallways and California parking lots stayed with him. He knew another chapter could still be written. The critics had counted him out, but John Travolta wasn't finished, not even close. After years of disappointment, he got an unexpected call in 1993 that would change everything. Director Quentin Tarantino wanted him for a leading role in a strange, edgy film that no major studio believed in. The movie was Pulp Fiction. Most executives didn't think Travolta was the right fit. Some thought his career was too far gone, but Tarantino insisted. He saw something in Travolta that the industry had forgotten, a mix of charm, danger, and real acting skill. When Pulp Fiction hit theaters in 1994, it exploded. The film became a box office hit, a cultural moment, and a critical masterpiece. Travolta's role as Vincent Vega, a smooth but clumsy hitman, was unforgettable. He earned his second Oscar nomination, and this time it wasn't about nostalgia, it was proof that he still had range. The comeback was complete. In the years that followed, Travolta took on roles that let him show everything he had. He played a slick gangster in Get Shorty, a villain with dual personalities in Face Off, and even a politician in Primary Colours. His name alone could command $20 million per film. He was back at the top, but here's where the story takes a painful turn. Even as his professional life soared, his personal life remained haunted by past grief, and new heartbreak was just around the corner. Back in 1976, Travolta had met actress Diana Hyland while filming The Boy in the Plastic Bubble. She was 18 years older than him and cast as his mother. Off-screen though, they fell in love. It was his first serious relationship, the kind where marriage and children were real conversations, but their time together was short. Diana had been quietly battling breast cancer, and she passed away in March 1977, just as Travolta's star was beginning to rise. He later said that she was the first person who made him believe love could heal. Her death left a wound he carried silently for decades. Then, in 1978, as Grease was becoming a worldwide hit, Travolta's mother, Helen Cecilia Burke, was diagnosed with the same disease. But she kept it from him. She didn't want to interrupt his moment of success. For months, she fought quietly. When Travolta found out, he flew home as often as he could between premieres and appearances. She passed away in December 1978. It was the second major loss in less than 2 years, both to breast cancer. Travolta kept going. He danced, acted, and smiled on red carpets. But behind the scenes, he was a young man trying to carry grief while pretending to be okay. His father eventually remarried, just 6 months after Helen's death, to the nurse who had cared for her. John never spoke out against it publicly, but those close to him said it left a deep scar. He poured that pain into his performances. Every dance in Saturday Night Fever, every smirk in Grease, every line he delivered in the years that followed. There was always something deeper going on. The grief didn't end. It just got folded into the work. Fast forward to the 2000s, and Travolta seemed to have found peace. He was married to Kelly Preston, an actress he met in 1987 and married in 1991. They had 2 kids, Jet, born in 1992, and Ella, born in 2000. Life at home was filled with laughter, bedtime stories, and airplane sketches, especially from Jet, who shared his dad's love for flying. To the outside world, John Travolta was not just a comeback story. He was proof that resilience could win. But fate wasn't finished testing him. By the early 2000s, John Travolta had built what looked like the perfect life: career success, financial security, and a loving family. But behind the public smiles, his family was quietly dealing with something incredibly difficult. His son Jet, born in 1992, had been diagnosed with Kawasaki disease as a toddler, a rare condition that affects blood vessels and can weaken the immune system. Over time, Jet also developed frequent seizures. Travolta and his wife Kelly Preston made a deliberate decision to step away from public attention to focus on his care. They built their routines around him, prioritizing privacy over publicity. They kept the household as joyful as possible: airplane drawings, family games, and soft routines that gave their son a sense of comfort and love. Then, in January 2009, everything changed. The family had gone on a vacation to the Bahamas. On the morning of January 2nd, Travolta heard a scream from down the hall. It was Ella, their daughter, calling for help. Jet had suffered a seizure in the bathroom, fallen, and struck his head on the tub. Travolta ran to the scene and tried CPR with his own hands. It was no use. Jet had passed away at 16 years old. Travolta later said, "There's no pain like this. It doesn't go away. It just lives inside you." In one moment, his world had collapsed, and while the emotional pain was unbearable, what followed made it even worse. People tried to exploit his tragedy. Within weeks, strangers launched an extortion attempt, demanding $25 million from the Travolta family. The individuals claimed they would release private information about Jet's death if the money wasn't paid. A court case followed, dragging the grieving family into the spotlight at the worst possible time. Travolta had to relive the trauma again, this time in front of cameras, lawyers, and strangers. It felt like cruelty stacked on top of cruelty, one family friend said. After the funeral, John and Kelly vanished from public life. They shut down appearances, skipped film projects, and focused completely on surviving emotionally. Ella, who was just 9 years old, clung to her parents, asking questions they couldn't answer. Jet's room sat untouched. His drawings, notebooks, and favourite shirts remained in place. Some days Travolta admitted he couldn't get out of bed. The cameras, which once symbolised success, now felt like intrusions. He considered never acting again. But in late 2010, hope returned in a surprising way. At age 47, Kelly Preston became pregnant. On November 23, 2010, the couple welcomed Benjamin, their third child. Travolta called him their miracle baby. For a family drowning in sorrow, Benjamin was a lifeline. Travolta later said, "It was like God gave us a reason to keep going." Slowly, life began to recover. Birthday candles returned. Laughter reappeared in the hallways. Ella, now a protective big sister, helped care for her new sibling. Travolta started flying again, taking Benjamin up into the clouds on short trips. At home they played tennis, baked pancakes, and built back a sense of normalcy, piece by piece. But they never forgot Jet. His photos stayed up, and his memory was honoured through the Jet Travolta Foundation, a charity created to support children with special needs. It quietly funded education programs, paediatric research, and autism awareness groups across the country. Yet even with new joy, the shadow of loss never fully left. Travolta knew what grief felt like, and how fast happiness could be taken away. He once said, "Love is worth the risk, even if it costs you everything." That belief guided how he lived, how he parented, and how he kept moving forward. Then came the next blow. In 2018, Travolta's world was rocked again, this time by news that Kelly Preston had been diagnosed with breast cancer. The same disease that had taken his mother and Diana Hyland was back, striking closer than ever. And once again, John Travolta was forced to fight a battle he had already lost, twice. By 2018, John Travolta had already experienced more loss than most people face in a lifetime. But when his wife, Kelly Preston, was diagnosed with breast cancer, the weight of that word returned like a haunting echo. This wasn't the first time cancer had touched his life. It had already taken his first love, his mother, and his closest co-stars. Now it was coming for the one person who had rebuilt him after every fall. Kelly chose to fight her illness in private. She didn't want the spotlight, the pity, or the headlines. She focused instead on protecting their children, Ella and Benjamin, from the fear and uncertainty that comes with terminal illness. Even while undergoing treatment, she kept their household filled with laughter, warmth, and hope. John, meanwhile, stayed by her side every step of the way. He became her caretaker, her support system, and her constant. He cancelled projects. He kept the cameras at a distance. At night he would sit beside her bed, holding her hand, whispering promises he desperately wanted to keep. When friends asked how she was doing, John simply said, "She's fighting, and we're right there with her." But the fight didn't last forever. On July 12, 2020, Kelly Preston passed away at just 57 years old. Travolta made the announcement himself, describing her as a bright, beautiful soul who had fought a courageous battle. But what the public saw as a composed message was, in reality, the sound of a man losing his anchor. The woman who had helped him survive the loss of their son was now gone. The partner he had called his miracle was no longer there. The grief was crushing. Their home in Florida fell quiet. Her voice no longer filled the hallways. Her perfume still lingered on pillows and clothes. At the dinner table, her chair sat empty. At night, Travolta would reach across the bed, only to find cold sheets. Kelly's absence wasn't just emotional, it shook the very rhythm of his life. For years, they had built a routine based on teamwork. Now, he had to find a way to keep that rhythm alive for Ella, who was now 20, and Benjamin, who was just 9. He later said, "My children are my lifeline, they keep me going." It wasn't a slogan, it was survival. And then, just 2 months later, tragedy struck again. In September 2020, Travolta's younger half-brother, Sam Travolta Jr., passed away unexpectedly at the age of 52. The cause was not made public, but the timing was devastating. The flowers from Kelly's memorial had barely wilted when John found himself grieving again. 2 funerals, 2 losses, 1 man. A family friend later said that Travolta whispered during the second memorial, almost to himself, "How much more can one soul endure?" And fate still wasn't finished. In August 2022, his beloved Grease co-star Olivia Newton-John died after a long battle with breast cancer. To the world, she was Sandy to his Danny. But to John, she was something deeper, a confidant, a sister in spirit, and a friend who had walked beside him during his earliest moments of fame. When he learned of her passing, he wrote, "My dearest Olivia, you made all of our lives so much better. I love you so much. We'll see each other again." It wasn't a press statement. It was the voice of a man losing yet another part of his past. And just months later, in December 2022, it happened again. Kirstie Alley, his co-star from Look Who's Talking, passed away after a short battle with cancer. They had remained close for over 30 years, and she had been a warm, constant presence in his life. Her passing marked yet another name added to a list that was growing heartbreakingly long. In only a few years, John Travolta had buried his wife, his brother, and 2 close friends. Add that to the earlier losses of Diana Hyland, his mother, his son Jet, and the betrayals of fate that followed, and the full weight becomes almost unimaginable. Still, John didn't disappear. He stayed close to his children. He focused on Ella's growing career in acting and music, and he made time for Benjamin's school events and hobbies. He flew them across the country in his private jet, trying to keep life as normal as possible. But behind the red carpet smiles and social media posts was a man holding himself together for the sake of his family. The heartbreak didn't vanish. It simply became something he carried, every day, every night. By the end of 2022, John Travolta was no longer just a Hollywood star, he was a man surrounded by ghosts. The loss of 7 loved ones, many to the same disease, had created a silence in his life that even fame couldn't drown out. And yet, somehow, he didn't break. In public, he smiled gently. In interviews, he spoke quietly. And in his private life, he made one thing clear: his children were his priority. In the years following Kelly's passing, John devoted himself fully to Ella and Benjamin. He cooked meals, planned family trips, and stayed present. Not just as a parent, but as the emotional foundation of the home. He once said, "I owe it to them to be present." That became his mission, and the results showed. Ella, born in 2000, began stepping into the spotlight, but always with grace. She acted in films like Old Dogs and The Poison Rose, and even released her own music. But more importantly, she often spoke of her dad not as a celebrity, but as a hero. Benjamin, born in 2010, grew up surrounded by aviation, music, and deep family bonds. Now a teenager, he's often seen flying planes with his father or playing sports under the Florida sun. To John, Ben is more than a son. He's a second chance. "He pulled me back from despair," Travolta said in an interview. "He gave me something to live for." So where is John Travolta now? He's still working, just on his terms. In 2023, he appeared in a light-hearted, Grease-themed Super Bowl commercial, dancing with the same charm that made him a star decades earlier. He picks roles carefully and avoids projects that pull him too far from home. Acting is no longer about career. It's about enjoyment, legacy, and staying sharp. He still flies his own jets, something he's loved since the 80s. His home in Ocala, Florida isn't just a mansion, it's part of a private aviation estate where his front door opens to a 7,500-foot runway. He owns and flies Learjets, Gulfstreams, and other aircraft. His late son Jet had once dreamed of becoming a pilot, and each flight now carries more meaning than ever. Travolta also manages an impressive real estate portfolio. Over the years, he's owned properties in Brentwood, Clearwater, and a 17-bedroom estate in Maine. Most of these have been sold or downsized as he narrowed his focus to his home base in Ocala, a place built not for publicity, but for peace. But more important than wealth is what he gives back. In memory of Jet, he and Kelly launched the Jet Travolta Foundation, which quietly donates to causes like pediatric hospitals, autism research, and children with special needs. Unlike some celebrities, Travolta never publicizes these donations. For him, philanthropy isn't about headlines, it's about healing, and that's what his life has become. A quiet, steady act of healing. The man who once filled stadiums with cheers now finds joy in pancake breakfasts, movie nights, and teaching his kids how to fly. He doesn't chase youth, he embraces who he is, clean-shaven, elegant, and calm. In many ways, his greatest role is the one he's living now. A father, a survivor, and a man who has learned how to keep loving after unimaginable loss. Even after the spotlight fades, the story doesn't end. Travolta is living proof that survival isn't loud. It's found in showing up day after day, loving your children, honouring the past, and building something steady in the present. He's not trying to recapture the past, he's making peace with it. At 71, John Travolta's story isn't just about Hollywood fame, it's about survival, grief, and the quiet power of love. After 5 decades in the spotlight, dozens of films, and countless headlines, what stands out most isn't the awards or the money. It's how he kept going, even when the world expected him to fold. He has lost a wife, a son, a brother, and 5 friends to cancer. He's buried the woman who gave him life, the woman who taught him love, and the woman who helped him find joy again. Yet despite all of that, he still shows up for his children, still flies his planes, still finds ways to smile. Travolta has always said that love is worth the risk, even when it hurts. He's lived that truth again and again. Every loss brought him closer to what really matters: family, memory, and purpose. His children, Ella and Benjamin, are not just his lifeline. They're the legacy he now pours himself into. But here's what makes Travolta unique. He doesn't use tragedy for attention. You won't find him crying on talk shows or reliving pain for views. Instead, he quietly shares birthday videos, Father's Day photos, and moments of real warmth with his kids. He lets the work speak, and more importantly, he lets the love show. He's also learned when to say no. In an industry that constantly pressures stars to stay relevant, Travolta has chosen a slower, quieter pace. He only takes roles that mean something. He turns down scripts that keep him away from home too long. He's not chasing anything anymore. He's protecting what he still has. His silence says more than any movie could. When Kelly died, when Jet passed, when Olivia and Kirsty were taken, he didn't collapse publicly. He retreated, healed, and rebuilt, brick by brick, in private. That quiet strength has made his journey more meaningful than any film. And while his name might not dominate the headlines like it once did, his story still resonates, not because he's famous, but because he's human. Because even after all the lights fade and the cameras go home, John Travolta still believes in showing up. Whether it's for a school event, a foundation grant, or just a slow walk down the runway with his son, he keeps going. Not for attention, not for applause, but because he understands what it means to love, to lose, and to still choose hope. His life is not a fairy tale, it's something better, it's real, and for anyone who's ever faced deep loss or quiet grief, his journey stands as a reminder. You don't have to be loud to be strong, you just have to keep moving forward. Today, Travolta isn't defined by the characters he played, but by the life he built between the scenes. And that life, built on memories, resilience, and unconditional love, is a story that will outlast any film credit. It all began in a noisy house in Englewood, New Jersey, a cramped space filled with 6 children, unpaid bills, and the constant rattle of a half-empty refrigerator. That's where John Travolta learned to fight for attention, to turn emotion into expression, and to use performance as both a shield and a weapon. It was a rough start, but one that quietly shaped everything that came after. He didn't come from money, he didn't have an easy path. He had a dream, $150, and the stubborn belief that he was meant for something more. And somehow, he made that belief real, through hard work, resilience, and the kind of courage most people never see. But here's what people often miss. The story didn't peak with Grease or Saturday Night Fever. It didn't end with Pulp Fiction or fade with the slower box office years. Travolta's most meaningful chapters happened off-screen, during hospital stays, late-night goodbyes, and quiet moments holding his children's hands. Yes, he danced. Yes, he flew planes. Yes, he owned mansions. But through it all, he also buried nearly everyone who made those triumphs meaningful. His first love, his mother, his son, his wife, his closest friends, all gone, many to the same disease, yet somehow he never became bitter. He never lashed out or disappeared completely. He kept showing up, he kept rebuilding, he kept loving. That's the part people should remember most. Because in a world obsessed with fame and flash, John Travolta's real legacy is persistence. Not just in acting, but in living. He proved you can survive loss without losing yourself, that it's possible to protect your peace without shutting down completely, and that even when grief rewrites your life, you can still choose to live with purpose. Today, he spends most of his time in a Kala, in a home surrounded by runway lights instead of stage lights. He watches Ella perform, teaches Benjamin how to fly, and honours Jet with every act of compassion the Jet Travolta Foundation carries out. His life has become slower, but more focused. Less about cameras, more about connection. He doesn't need the applause anymore, he already earned it. At 71, Travolta doesn't need to reveal anything dramatic. What he's shown us in silence speaks loud enough. His greatest role isn't Tony Manero or Danny Zuko or Vincent Vega, it's who he became in the aftermath of everything he lost. And that's what we all suspected. John Travolta was never just an actor. He was a fighter, a father, a man who kept going. Not because it was easy, but because love was always worth it, even when the cost was everything. There's something powerful about a man who chooses to keep going, not for the cameras, not for the world, but for the people who still need him. That's what separates John Travolta from so many other public figures. His story isn't about one comeback, it's about learning how to rebuild a life after each one of its foundations gets pulled away. When you really step back and look at it, what makes Travolta's story so lasting isn't the roles or the box office records. It's not the fame, the planes, or the awards. It's how he's handled grief, not just once, but again and again. Every time the world handed him another heartbreak, he didn't vanish. He just got quieter, more focused, and more devoted to what really mattered. And in that silence, he showed us what strength looks like. He never made his pain into a brand. He didn't profit off his tragedy. When his son died, he stepped away. When his wife passed, he kept the details private. When his friends disappeared one by one, he mourned them respectfully. In an industry that rewards exposure, Travolta took the opposite route. He leaned into privacy, into grace, and into the people who still needed him to be strong. And maybe that's why so many people still care about his story. Because it feels human, not curated, not exaggerated, just real. Travolta's entire career, in hindsight, looks like a reflection of who he really is underneath the roles. A man with soul, a man with heartbreak, a man with quiet fire. From the moment he danced across the screen in white shoes and a black shirt, people felt something in him. It wasn't just charisma, it was survival. And that's what's kept his story alive all these years later. He never needed to say much. The way he lives now says everything. Still flying, still parenting, still loving, still here.